He didn't even look her in the eye. Just another black woman in handcuffs, he thought. Another case to sweep through the system before lunch. The fluorescent courtroom lights flickered slightly above. A low hum of the ceiling fan mingled with the heavy breathing of the bailiff. Judge Barrett adjusted his robe with the same indifference he'd shown to hundreds before her. The name Kendra Ellis might as well have been nuisance number 5 on the docket. She stood straight, wrists still cuffed despite her being compliant. Her eyes didn't beg. They watched. State versus Kendra Ellis, the clerk announced. Barrett barely raised an eyebrow. "What's this one?" he muttered. "Felony obstruction," the prosecutor replied, rising quickly. "Resisted officers during a highway traffic stop. No license, no ID. Refused to get out of the vehicle and allegedly shouted threats at law enforcement." Barrett didn't ask for more. "And she has a record." "No priors," the prosecutor admitted. "But she—" "No need," Barrett interrupted. "Sounds textbook." Kendra's attorney, a public defender with 3 coffees too few and 20 clients too many, opened his mouth weakly. "Your Honor, if I may." Barrett raised his hand without looking. "Save it for sentencing." Kendra finally spoke. Calm, precise. Her voice cut the air like a violin string pulled too tight. "Judge Barrett, I respectfully request to represent myself." The courtroom paused. Barrett leaned forward, finally seeing her not as a woman, not as black, but as a disruption. "Do you have legal training, Miss Ellis?" Her lips barely moved. "I'm licensed in Texas and D.C. I hold a J.D. from Columbia Law. I serve as Senior Legal Policy Advisor to Governor Marcus Hale." Someone coughed in disbelief. Barrett's fingers froze mid-note on his docket. I wasn't made aware." "No, you weren't. It was the beginning of the unraveling. 3 days earlier, the Texas sun had no mercy. Kendra stood beside her black BMW, parked 3 inches over the white shoulder line. The 2 troopers were already on edge when they approached. One had his hand near his belt before even saying hello. She'd been pulled over for erratic behavior, meaning she didn't smile when they waved her down. "License and registration," barked the first trooper. "It's in the glove box," she said, slow and clear. "What are you reaching for?" "My license." "You just keep your hands where I can see them." Her breath caught, but her hands froze mid-air. She was dragged out within 90 seconds. No questions, no Miranda. Just asphalt, zip ties, and cell phone video from a man across the street that would take 2 days to go viral. Back to the courtroom. Barrett squinted at her as if a shadow was lifting. But he didn't soften. Power doesn't apologize. It reshapes. "We'll break for 20, he said. Behind the doors, panic bloomed like blood in water. His clerk leaned close. We didn't know. No one told me she was with the governor," Barrett whispered, his voice like dry leaves. His assistant handed him a phone. "Call from Hale's office." He didn't take it. Instead, he looked down at the case file again. Black ink, white paper lies stacked in lines. Outside, and holding, Kendra sat alone, her blazer wrinkled, her pride intact. She didn't cry. She planned. Because this wasn't about her. It was about all the women like her who couldn't cite case law or name-drop power. Women who disappeared between court dates. Women misjudged by robes who feared defiance in brown skin. And she wasn't done. When court resumed, she stood before the bench, having shed the title, the job, the armor. Just Kendra Ellis. Human. Black. Accused. She didn't speak of the governor. She spoke of Texas. Of history. Of statistics and bias and stop rates and broken ribs in holding cells. She cited Fourth Amendment precedent with such clarity that even the jury foreman leaned in. She wove her defense into a tapestry of injustice so personal and vast that even Barrett shifted in his chair, unready for the weight of what she'd made him face. Then came the footage. The bystander's video played in full. The silence in the room was colder than any gavel. And when she rested her case, it wasn't with a bow, it was with a look. A long, burning stare that said, "I see you. And now they do too." Barrett adjourned for deliberation. What followed outside that courtroom was fury wrapped in suits. The governor's spokesperson issued statements. Civil rights attorneys sent subpoenas. Journalists uncovered Barrett's conviction record: 85% black defendants, 2% acquittals. Patterns painted clearer than portraits. But Kendra didn't wait. She stayed. For the verdict. For the reckoning. For what came next. The deliberation lasted 2 hours. That was longer than expected. The last black defendant, Judge Barrett, had tried one who had also pleaded not guilty, got his verdict in less than 20 minutes. But something about this trial clung to the jury room like smoke. Something about the woman who stood before them not just defending herself, but dissecting the very system they represented. Kendra waited in the courtroom, sitting quietly at the defense table. No leg bouncing, no pacing. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her. She stared ahead past the empty bench, past the reporters scribbling furiously in the second, rowing to a place only she could see. Her mind wasn't on the verdict. It was on the fire she had lit. Whether I win or lose, someone's going to see this, she thought. Someone's going to know what happened in this room. And someone's going to ask how many others didn't get a second look. The bailiff returned. "They've reached a verdict." Judge Barrett re-entered, slower than usual. His face gave away nothing. But the tension in his jaw, the nervous flutter of fingers brushing the bench, knew this moment mattered. The jury filed in. The foreman, a middle-aged Latina woman with wire-rimmed glasses, unfolded the slip of paper and handed it to the bailiff. He passed it to the clerk. Barrett cleared his throat. "Has the jury reached a unanimous decision?" "We have, Your Honor." The room held its breath. The clerk stood. "In the matter of the state of Texas versus Kendra Ellis on the charge of felony obstruction of a peace officer, we the jury find the defendant." She paused. 1 second. 2. "Not guilty." Silence. Then gasps. Then a voice from the back. "Hell yes." Quickly followed by gavel pounding and a stern order from Barrett, who looked paler than he had all week. Kendra exhaled, slow and deep. Not relief. Not triumph. Just air. Just breath returning to lungs that had held it too long. But she didn't smile. Not yet. The prosecutor slumped in his seat, blinking as if trying to wake from a bad dream. He'd built the case on assumptions. Traffic stop plus black woman plus refusal to obey equals guilty. His opening statement had been 3 minutes. Kendra's closing? Nearly 20. Facts and fury in equal parts. Barrett stood. "Ms. Ellis, you're free to go." "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, not bowing her head. As she left the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks, but she raised a hand and said only, "Not today." Outside, the heat hit her like truth. Sudden, honest, brutal. She walked down the courthouse steps alone, but not unnoticed. A small group of young women stood at the bottom. Black, brown, white. Law students, maybe, or maybe just watchers. One of them clutched a printed-out photo Kendra in handcuffs, taken from the viral video. Another held a cardboard sign. "This system isn't broken, it was built this way." Their eyes met hers. Not pity, not awe, just recognition. Kendra nodded once and kept walking. That night, she met Governor Marcus Hale behind closed doors in the Capitol building. No press, no cameras, just the two of them in a silence that stretched before the first word. "I heard," Hale finally said. "You should have known," Kendra replied. "I did, but not soon enough." She gave him a look sharp, tired. "I'm sorry," he said. I don't need apologies. I need action. He nodded. We're already working on it. Judicial review boards, mandatory body cam audits, prosecutor oversight. You'll eat it if you still want the job. She didn't answer right away. What I want, she said after a moment, is for what happened to me to mean something. Not just for me. For the girl who'll stand in front of that bench next week with no title, no platform, no defense but her skin and her truth. You'll have it, Hale said. Make it count. Over the next few weeks, the fallout hit like a Texas storm. Media outlets spun it every way they could. Some painted Kendra as a wronged hero. Others questioned how she got into that position in the first place. What was a top legal advisor doing driving alone near the border? Online trolls dragged her name. They said she baited the officers, that she played the race card, that she used her job to get off easy. But the body cam footage released under pressure told a different story. So did her testimony. So did her record. Soon, Judge Barrett found himself under formal investigation by the Texas State Commission on Judicial Conduct. His sentencing history became the centerpiece of an expose. Former defendants came forward. One woman revealed that Barrett once asked her in open court if she knew how to speak proper English. That was on record. He retired before the inquiry concluded, but the system didn't vanish with him. That's why Kendra stayed. She traveled, spoke at law schools, appeared before legislative committees, met with defense attorneys in rural towns who had never seen a black woman walk in a court and win. She used her title now, Senior Legal Policy Advisor, but she made sure it didn't shield her, it amplified others. At one speech in Dallas, she stood behind a podium, looking out at a sea of students, many of whom looked just like her. Let me be clear, she said. This wasn't a miracle. It was a near miss. And the only reason I walked out of that courtroom free was because I had a resume that scared the hell out of a powerful man. Laughter, applause. But she raised her hand to quiet them. And that's not justice. That's survival. She looked them all in the eye. Don't mistake the sound of a gavel for the presence of truth. And don't ever forget power doesn't change systems. People do. 1 year later, on the anniversary of her trial, she returned to that same courtroom. Barrett was gone. A new judge sat on the bench, a Latina woman with a reputation for fairness and fire. Kendra sat in the gallery. The defendant that day was a 17-year-old boy named Malik, arrested for disturbing the peace after yelling during a school board protest. But this time, the public defender brought receipts, cited precedent, asked for a jury. The judge listened. And Kendra? She just watched. Because justice wasn't a single verdict. It was this, knowing the next kid might not be alone when he stood before the law. And knowing that once, in a courtroom where truth nearly died, a woman refused to disappear quietly. She stood, she fought, and she changed everything. It was supposed to be over. But nothing in Texas politics stays quiet for long. 6 months after her acquittal, Kendra Ellis found herself under fire again, this time not as a defendant, but as a disruptor. The reform bills she authored, aimed at reducing judicial bias and holding law enforcement accountable, had gained traction in the Senate. And that traction was making powerful people very nervous. Emails leaked. Anonymous op-eds appeared overnight in major papers. Radical agenda masquerading as reform. Do we want activists writing law? The quiet war had begun. Governor Hale summoned her to his office again. This time, his tie was already loosened before she entered. He looked tired, not old, just worn. They're trying to get the bill, he said flatly. Committee hearings have been delayed. Key supporters are pulling back. Kendra sat without asking. Who's behind it, she asked. Barrett's friends. Old judicial bloc. Former prosecutors. A few donors I shouldn't name. She nodded. She wasn't surprised. They're afraid you'll succeed. No, she said. "They're afraid I'll expose how easy it was for them to get away with it for this long." Hale looked at her for a moment. "What do you want to do?" She didn't hesitate. "Testify. Publicly. Before the Senate committee. That'll be war. It already is." 2 weeks later, the room was packed. She wore the same navy suit she'd worn to her trial, the one with the stitched hair and the lining she refused to fix. It reminded her of the cracks in everything polished. Even power. Even justice. She sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee, eyes locked on the 5 Republican senators who had made it clear they would vote her bill down. "My name is Kendra Ellis," she began, "and I'm not here to make you comfortable." A few raised their eyebrows. Cameras flashed. "I'm here because I survived something I was never supposed to survive. And because most people like me don't." She held up a printed docket. Names. Charges. Races. Outcomes. Over the past 10 years, Judge Barrett presided over 4,317 criminal cases in Travis County. Of those defendants, 68% were black, though black residents make up just 11% of the county population. Of those 68%, only 3% received plea deals involving no jail time. She flipped a page. These are not isolated errors. They're consistent outcomes, and they happened in your courts. The chairwoman, a white woman from El Paso, leaned in. "Ms. Ellis, are you alleging systemic racial bias in our judiciary?" Kendra looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not alleging it. I'm proving it." The room murmured. Some shifted in their chairs. Others looked down at the report's passed-out page after page of numbers. Lives reduced to data points. I've worked on both sides of this system. I've drafted policy, and I've been handcuffed on the side of a road for allegedly resisting an order I never disobeyed. I've been the advisor behind the podium and the accused behind the plexiglass. Let me tell you something I know from both. Justice is not blind, but it is deeply selective. Silence. Then, one senator older, silver-haired, his tone clip-spoke. "You talk about statistics and systemic problems, but what about personal accountability? What about the officer's word that day? Shouldn't we trust the people tasked with keeping us safe?" Kendra's voice was steady. "Trust isn't the issue. Accountability is. I don't believe that every officer is corrupt, but I do believe that when power goes unchecked, it stops being protection and starts being control. And in Texas, we've been controlled long enough." She paused. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to stop what happened to me from becoming someone else's story." The vote was delayed, but the headlines weren't. Ellis testifies shakes Senate with data and defying grace. Judge's record under scrutiny in wake of Ellis' speech. Woman who shook the system. Kendra Ellis crusade. But backlash followed. Social media attacks grew crueler. She was labeled everything from race baiter to carpetbagger. They dissected her personal life, questioned her credentials, even sent threats. Her assistant once found a noose drawn in red ink on a manila envelope outside her office door. No fingerprints, no leads, just fear left like a calling card. But she didn't stop. Instead, she expanded. She created the Bench Project, a nonprofit that trained young attorneys from underrepresented communities to run for judicial office. It was more than symbolic. It was a strategy. "Don't just change the system," she told them. "Occupy it." And they did. By the following year, 2 of her trainees had won local races in Houston and Fort Worth. Small ripples, but real ones. Still, the resistance was relentless. One evening, as she left the town hall in Beaumont, her car was vandalized. Tires slashed, windows cracked. The words "liar in a suit" keyed into the door. She called no press, just a tow truck. "Why do you keep doing this?" Her friend Leah asked her that night, over wine and exhaustion. "You've already done more than enough." Kendra stared out the window. Because the system never sleeps, she said. So why should I? It all came to a head 18 months later. The Reform Bill revised, rewritten, refought finally reached the floor. It was renamed the Ellis Judicial Equity Act. On the day of the vote, Kendra didn't sit in the gallery. She stood outside the Capitol, flanked by dozens of families whose lives had been shattered by wrongful convictions. Mothers of men still behind bars. Children holding photos of uncles and brothers they only knew from letters. When the final vote tally was announced, 23 in favor, 8 against, a cheer erupted so loud it shook the rotunda. She didn't cry, but she let herself breathe. Not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. Months later, she visited the juvenile detention center outside San Antonio. Not as a guest, not as a speaker, just as someone who knew what it meant to be unseen. She met a boy named Devin, 16, arrested for shoplifting a bag of chips, held for 3 weeks because his family couldn't post $250 bail. He asked her what it felt like to win. She looked at him. It didn't feel like a win, she said. It felt like not drowning for the first time. Will always be like that, he asked. She thought for a moment. Maybe not always, but for now we swim together. She left him with her card. Call me when you're out. We'll talk about law school. Devin laughed. Me? A lawyer? She grinned. Why not? You've already survived the system. Now learn how to change it. And as she walked out past locked doors and rusted fences, past the officers who nodded just a little more respectfully, now she remembered the moment that changed everything. A courtroom, a robe, a decision made before a word was spoken, and the woman who refused to stay silent. The fight wasn't over, but neither was she. Years passed. The world changed incrementally, achingly, and often invisibly, but it changed. Texas was no longer the same courtroom it had once been. Neither was Kendra. Her hair now carried strands of gray, not from age, but from fight. She no longer needed introductions when she entered rooms. Her name had become both armor and invitation. In 2030, she was appointed to the Texas Supreme Court. The announcement shook the country. The woman once handcuffed roadside, silenced in court, vilified online now wore the robe she had once stood before. Only hers wasn't heavy with ego or tradition. Hers was lined with memory. At her confirmation hearing, a young senator asked her, Justice Ellis, what does the law mean to you now? She smiled gently, then answered, it means memory. The law remembers what it's told to remember. And for too long, it's remembered the wrong things. Who to fear, who to punish, who to silence. My job isn't just to interpret it. It's to correct its memory. She was confirmed 27-4. But the moment didn't go to her head. She didn't bask. She got to work. One of her first opinions came in the case of Carter versus Travis County, where a young black father had been convicted based on a coerced confession. The majority upheld the conviction. She dissented. Her words, though not victorious, ignited public outrage and led to an appeal that would overturn the case a year later. Her dissent read in part, we do not serve justice when we defend the process over the person. Law is not holy. It is human, and when it errs, it must be forced to confess its own sins. She became a symbol, but she refused to become a statue, because Kendra knew the danger of being turned into inspiration without action. She declined awards. She spoke rarely in public. When she did, her words carried the weight of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. She mentored young clerks, especially women of color. You don't owe them politeness, she told one intern who hesitated to challenge a senior colleague's argument. You owe them truth. In 2034, she was asked to deliver the commencement address at Columbia Law School, her alma mater, the same campus where she had once studied in libraries while classmates dismissed her as a diversity admit. She stood behind the podium and took a long moment before speaking. Then, you will enter a world built to resist your presence. And your job is not just to succeed within it. Your job is to remake it, brick by brick, bench by bench. The students rose in applause before she even finished. And yet, through it all, Kendra never forgot the road she came from. She never stopped driving, alone never stopped refusing the escort vehicles the state insisted on giving her. One day, while driving back from a lecture in rural Texas, she passed a diner off Highway 77. It looked familiar. She pulled over. Inside, a waitress greeted her without recognition. Kendra sat at the corner booth, same as she had once years ago after her trial. She ordered black coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt hope. From the window, she watched an officer pull someone over. A black woman. The officer approached her car, slowly, no hand on his weapon. Just conversation. After a minute, he let her go. No ticket, no cuffs, just a wave and a nod. It seemed small, insignificant, but to Kendra, it was a proof of erosion, a slow undoing of a system that had once swallowed her whole. Back in Austin, Governor Hale had retired. His successor, a Latina woman with roots in El Paso Public Defense, was one of Kendra's earliest mints. She often credited Kendra for planting the seeds of the revolution and then reminding us to water them. And in 2036, a proposal began circulating in the Texas legislature, renaming the Travis County Courthouse. Some wanted to honor former governors or long-deceased justices. Others fought for a new name altogether. But the bill that passed quietly, without ceremony, changed it to the Kendra Ellis Justice Center. She didn't attend the dedication ceremony. Instead, she visited Devin. Now 28, he was a third-year law student in Houston. His office wall bore a framed letter from her, written the day he was released from juvenile detention. "You once asked me if the fight would ever end," she said, handing him a book on constitutional law. He smiled. "Does that mean I get to disagree with you in court?" "You better," she said, "or I wasted all this time." The final chapter came not in a courthouse, but in a small-town library. Kendra had been invited to speak at a community book club that was reading a memoir written about her, not by her. She rarely accepted those invitations, but this one had a handwritten note. "We're not trying to study you. We're trying to learn how to fight like you." She showed up in jeans and a sweater. No cameras, no applause, just 12 people sitting in a circle waiting for her to say something profound. Instead, she asked them, "How did the book make you feel?" A woman in her 60s, white, soft-spoken, replied, "Ashamed, but grateful, because now I can't unsee what I saw." Kendra nodded. "That's the first step. Now do something with it." A man across the room said, "You know, your story is what gives people like us hope." She smiled, gentle but firm. "Hope is cheap. Change costs something." She stood. "Pay it." When Kendra Ellis finally retired from the bench, she didn't throw a party. No press tour. No memoir. No Netflix deal. She left her robe on the hook, packed her briefcase, and walked out of the courthouse alone, just as she had that first time years ago. But this time, she didn't leave behind silence. She left behind a system changed by her voice, and in its place, 1,000 others rising. Because justice is not a moment. It is a movement, and she had moved it. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.